Gentlemen, welcome to another live edition of Rabbit Hole Radio. It is September 18th, 2021. So, tonight, everything should be flowing nice and smoothly. I got Mr. Bill in the background as my producer riding shotgun. Thank you to him. Bill always helps out, makes things flow smoothly. Haven't been on in the past couple weeks. I had a car accident a couple weeks ago. I was pretty banged up, so that kind of jacked up my plans for a couple weeks. And then last week we had a technical difficulty, and it happens. So we're here live tonight, back on track. Can't wait. I have a very information-packed broadcast for all of you tonight. So has everybody woken up to the fact that there is a New World Order agenda? And that you're seeing it unfold right in front of your eyes? You've heard me discuss this on this broadcast before, here on KGRA, and if you've listened to my broadcasts in the past, going all the way back to 2011, 10 years ago, when I first started doing broadcasting. Seems so long ago, it's crazy. But going back that far, we warned, myself and others, hey, there's this New World Order agenda, this abstract idea of a one-world government, a new world order, an order that is different than what we are used to. George Bush Sr. talked about this back in 91, talked about it too much, though. And then they kind of kept it quiet for a while. And if you mentioned New World Order or New World Order agenda, you were called a nutbag. Except you see it actually happening. Australia just announced. They just announced. They literally used the term New World Order. And they said, this is a New World Order. Because of their draconian police state that's going on over there. You're going to have a vaccine passport just to go to the bathroom practically in that country. Interestingly enough, their media, though, even though they're in such a police state over there, their media, Sky News, is probably the only place you'll get unabashed truth in the media about our government. And whenever you want to see President Biden and his cabinet get called out on their BS, just go to Sky News on their YouTube channel, which was just shut down for like a week. About 3 weeks ago, they were shut down for, I think, like a week or a couple days or whatever it was. Go check them out on YouTube and you'll see why. Man, do they call the U.S. government out? Good, somebody's got to, because our news media certainly doesn't. And I don't want to hear, oh, Fox News does. No, Fox News plays the other side of the coin, right? When Bush was in, they were pro-Bush. Everything the president could have done didn't matter. He could have bombed a busload of nuns. It would have been great. He was awesome. And then CNN and MSNBC were the opposition. And then Obama got in and boop, they switched roles because that's what they do. This whole left-right thing is a faux idea, a fake BS idea. It's used to divide us because they can't control 10 or 15 different groups. I mean, they can control some of them, but they can't control all of them. So the easiest way to control people is give them the illusion of choice. You don't want to just say, well, here's only A and blah, blah, blah. It's only going to be A, because they've done that in the past. And, well, that's what a dictator does, right? That's what a king does. That's what a despot does. So how do you get people to think that they don't have a despot in charge of them? You give them the illusion of choice. Let me pick the person that's going to enslave me and take away my rights. That's what the presidential election is about. It's a selection. It really is. This past one should have shown you that they will go to the ends of the earth to rig an election the way they want it to go. This isn't the first time it's happened. Great documentary by a lady named Bev Harris called Hacking Democracy. It was actually put out by HBO. Shocking, I know. The same people that would then, have different shows or different. Now they have one about the Q conspiracy. Go to HBO Max, you can see this little documentary about it. It's a joke, but the same people that, in there, they'll say there's no such thing as election tampering and election fraud, except in Hacking Democracy with Bev Harris, it shows you just that. It's amazing. Amazing how information changes depending on whose dude is in the chair at the Oval Office, huh? Oh, come on, let's be honest. Do you think really Biden is running anything? Even Congress is catching on. Forget which congressman it was. He just asked this week, who's actually running things? Who has the power to shut the president down? And of course, the Secretary of State was like, no one's got the power to shut the president down. The president speaks his mind whenever, except when he goes on and he's, you know what, I'm not supposed to take questions, but I will. And they shut his mic off and the live feed off. What does that tell you? Who has the power to hush the president? Who has the power to do that? Oh, well, Popeye, there are people behind the scenes. They have to do that. No, they do not. So who has the power to shut off the president? Isn't he supposedly the most powerful man in the free world? Right? Isn't he supposed to be the leader of men, the leader of countries? He is the president of the United States of America, except somebody in his administration can mute his microphone because he says stupid things. Because the man has Alzheimer's or some sort of dementia. And I'm not picking on anybody that has any brain issues, or I have somebody in my family that recently passed. My uncle, the man that taught me how to track and hunt, skills I still use to this very day. He taught me a lot of stuff, helped me be the man I am today. He passed away within the past few months due to dementia, due to Alzheimer's. It robbed him of his memories. I watched it. Saw, he wasn't the same person that I grew up with. Talking to him on the phone, he would forget who I was. I'd have to remind him. And then he would be like, oh, that's right. You're so-and-so's boy. I remember you. He helped raise me. He was like a second father to me. And that's what that did to him. So I'm not making fun of anybody with dementia, but I also don't think that somebody with dementia should have their finger on the button and be in charge of our military or in charge of anything in this country. I think he should be at home getting the care he needs. I mean, he really doesn't run stuff. They put him out to talk. He might engage in some talks here or there, but it's a puppet show. It's an absolute puppet show. Come on. We can all agree on this, right? It's an absolute puppet show. It's a joke. President Biden. What's scarier is if they get rid of him, then you have the laughing, cackling clown in there. Super cop. Kamala Harris. Nobody likes her either because she's got horrible optics. She doesn't know anything that she talks about, and she laughs at stuff that's super inappropriate. Don't want her in charge neither because she just doesn't have what it takes. It's what happens when you vote along tribal lines. Now you have somebody with their finger on the button that doesn't even belong anywhere near that building. And of course, the other side now, this feeds the whole left-right lie, though, because now you have the people that didn't vote for him are like, F you and F you if you voted for him, which I can understand the sentiment and I kind of agree with. But at the same time, all that is doing is fueling this left-right argument, which is a fake controlled argument. There's a reason why years and years and years ago, when we made federaljack.com, we came up with the Uncle Sam character, or the shadowy Uncle Sam character. If you look at our logo, it's an Uncle Sam, but he's kind of evil looking, And we call him Uncle Jack because federaljack.com. So the Uncle Jack character has a puppet on each hand, and each of the puppet's eyes are little hypnotizing circles, and his eyes are glowing red. And there's an all-seeing eye in the center of the top hat he's wearing, and it says, "I want you to fight amongst each other while I retain complete control." And each puppet on his hand is one's a Republican and one's a Democrat, and they're both obviously arguing with each other. The imagery is supposed to convey the point that the left and the right are two sides of the same coin. They're both a controlled argument, controlled by the very same people. But if everyone's arguing amongst themselves, no one's paying attention to the agenda or the direction we're headed in. And people could say, oh, well, I'm paying attention, and look, the whole country's awake now to a certain degree, but it's not really awake. They think they're awake, but it's controlled. There are more and more people starting to wake up and think outside the box. It's much harder to do so now, too, because people have had their Facebooks taken away, their Instagram taken away. I lost my Facebook and Instagram last October. It has been very difficult to not only communicate with other activists or radio show hosts or whoever or anybody, but it has slowed down the progression of information because it's harder to post anything. If you're still on Facebook and you post something, it gets censored. I still have a Twitter account, but my stuff gets shadow banned. I've tested it. Anything with Joe Biden in it, no, I could tag 4 people, 5 people in it, and they still won't see it. I have to go do something or make a comment repeatedly or get other people to go into the Twitter thread just to get any eyes on it because it gets blocked. It's pathetic. It's pathetic. It really is pathetic. Yeah, Trump made Getter with Gettr, which is like Twitter. I made an account over there, Rabbit Hole Radio. I already got a bunch of followers, but I don't know how, hopefully that'll grow, but still you're starting off at the very beginning again. And it doesn't matter if you could eventually grow your account to whatever. The fact that you have to put all that energy and effort into doing that basic thing when you could be able to focus on something else or putting more other information out there, you have to waste your time with that. There's only a certain amount of time in the day. Right? Unless you live in an apartment where you have nothing to do maintenance-wise, on your property. If you own a house and you have to do any type of yard maintenance or anything, you have to be able to, work your time during the course of the day. You have to have time management. They understand this. Why do you think they know that they're up against people that are working a regular job and doing, the alternative media thing? And some of the people may be doing it. They may have their channels completely monetized on YouTube, whatever. People are doing it. People are having a blast doing their stuff. They might be doing great. They might have, a couple good channels. People might be paying attention to it. That's awesome. But they know that most of those people are fighting another battle. They have to make money to pay the bills. So how do you make life difficult? How do you get people disenchanted? You do little things like what YouTube does. You make it so difficult to publish anything that most of the people that were publishing stuff 5 or 6 years ago aren't even on YouTube anymore because their channels have either been banned or their stuff gets blocked. Case in point, I got an email at 3:30 this morning that a broadcast that I put up from 2012 was labeled hate speech, and they removed it. And I can't have things like that up there. That's bad, bad, bad. Do you know what was labeled hate speech? It was a broadcast about the Vancouver 9/11 hearings. In 2012, there were a bunch of hearings in Vancouver, like a panel, discussion panels, and it was put together. There were many people, researchers from the United States, went over to Canada, presented evidence, and it was basically a hearing presenting all of the evidence that the 9/11 Commission either choose to ignore, didn't even look at, and realistic alternative theories to what the government's official version was. Now, I want you to remember that all theories relating to 9/11 at all, whether it's an alternative one or it's the government's sponsored theory, is still a conspiracy theory because there were supposedly 19 hijackers. And by legal definition, because conspiracy is a legal charge, they charged some of the people that took part in that January 6th LARP fest with conspiracy. So it doesn't mean, the word conspiracy doesn't mean fake or false or made up. That's totally been used as a label incorrectly. So is conspiracy theory. The term conspiracy means that the definition, you could look it up in the Merriam-Webster dictionary. The definition of the word conspiracy literally means two or more people getting together to do something bad, i.e. a plot. It does not mean fake. It doesn't mean ghosts. It doesn't mean the paranormal. It doesn't mean UFOs. It doesn't mean Bigfoot. Now, do I believe in Bigfoot, UFOs, and the paranormal? Yes, I totally do. They aren't in the conspiracy realm, though. They've been lumped together like that to muddy the waters and to get people looking at any of that stuff, to not be interested in it for one reason or another. Maybe the Bigfoot crowd thinks the UFOs are too crazy. Maybe the UFO people think that the Bigfoot stuff's too crazy. Maybe both of them think the government conspiracy stuff is too crazy. And maybe the government conspiracy people think that Bigfoot and UFOs and the paranormal are crazy, right? See how that works? When, interestingly enough, all of those different avenues of research are investigating different aspects of the world we live in that we all have questions about. So A, I don't think we should be crapping on any of them. And B, they shouldn't all be lumped into one category. They all deserve their own category, or at least subcategory of classification, because there's enough evidence to cover each one in its own right. You don't need to muddy the waters between them to add substance to any investigation or argument. But that's done because the normies, so to speak, the people that are just waking up and maybe getting into this or thinking about looking into any of this stuff, they maybe don't believe in UFOs, the paranormal, or Bigfoot. And if you try to link any of that with government conspiracies in someone's mind and you're successful, then they won't look at it because they think it's all hullabaloo or malarkey, as Biden would say. It's not, but that's not the point. The point is to create that in someone's mind. Everything that happens is a battle for your mind, ladies and gentlemen. It's a battle to control the way you think and how you think and how your children think and how their children will think. You really need to ask yourself is, why do the powers that shouldn't be, if they're so great and omnipotent and mean no harm and everything is for the greater good, why do they need to spend so much money, time, and effort and energy to get you to believe their lies? And why do they have to lie to you? And if they say, well, we have to lie to you because people wouldn't believe us or they wouldn't understand, so no. If you have to lie to me, then it's nefarious. Ladies and gentlemen, you are not stupid. You're not dumb. I know the powers that shouldn't be want you to believe that you're dumb, but you're not. And by telling you that you can't do X, Y, Z because or you can't know XYZ because you're too stupid or because the general public couldn't handle it. They're telling you you're dumb. They think you're stupid and that they're more enlightened than you. And only because they're more enlightened and have information and are part of this elite group can they understand this information in its entirety. Us peasants, we cannot. Well, I don't believe that. I don't think people are that stupid. Yes. Is humanity being dumbed down? Yup. Is America being dumbed down and turned into America in the movie Idiocracy? Yup. But it's a process that's been ongoing, and it has to take up so much effort and energy and resources to do it. Why? Why are they so afraid of you? Ask yourself that. Why are they so afraid of you? Why are they so afraid of you that they have to push you to get a vaccine and threaten you? Why? Why? Ask yourself that. Because you are more powerful than you could ever possibly imagine, ladies and gentlemen. You are infinite consciousness. And as soon as everybody realizes, and humanity as a collective realizes its full potential, their power stops. The game is over, and it ends that fast. The only reason why they have any power and any relevance is because they have to keep the masses suppressed by having access to information that only a small group of them have. If everybody was on the same page, then they wouldn't have the power that they have. They wouldn't have the abilities that they have because we'd all be equal in knowledge and understanding. So their relevance of being celebrities and having a celebrity status would go away. They'd lose power instantly, and they don't want that. That's why they do what they do. Because your true potential scares the living shit out of the elites. That's why. Remember that when they tell you that you're an idiot or you're stupid or you can't do anything and you're not good enough. You are good enough. Don't you ever believe them. You are more powerful, ladies and gentlemen, than you could ever possibly know, and that is why they keep everybody enslaved with their financial system the way they do. I'm going to use that as my segue because I want to get into the financial system, money creation, fractional reserve banking, and theft via tax and inflation. We're going to get into that right now. I have a clip I want to play for you. You've all heard me play this. Well, a different version of this clip I have played. But I got the extended version. It's about 20 minutes. It's from the movie Zeitgeist Addendum. I've played this in the past. I'm going to play it again, though, with a little bit more context in the clip because I want you, again, to understand how the money in our country is made. Because all this conversation that you see going on right now about, oh, well, there's two different bills. One's $1 trillion bill and the other one's $3.5 trillion. And, well, we're trying to save like maybe $0.5 trillion here or a little bit here or a little bit there. Joe Manchin seems to be the only person that's worried about the amount of money. And, of course, they're telling you, don't worry, it's covered, so inflation's not an issue. No, inflation is an issue. They know that the American public doesn't really understand fractional reserve banking or how inflation works and why inflation is theft of your money. Okay? It's robbing you of the purchasing power of the physical currency that you already have. Because if it's worth less, then you need more to get the same stuff. That's inflation. The more physical currency that's floating around, the less it's worth. They understand this. They're doing it on purpose. And yes, we could have inflation where in the way the money system works, you're going to have inflation and deflation. But if we didn't have to borrow the money at interest from a private banking consortium, then at least the government would be printing the money. See, everybody, that's the fallacy. Everybody thinks, well, the Federal Reserve is a federal branch, so they just print the money, right? No, the Federal Reserve is as federal as Federal Express. It's a private banking institution that we gave the power to print our money. When we didn't need to do that, we already had the power to print our own money. Anyway, I digress. I'm going to play this clip because I like to use this as an explainer because they did a good job when they put this documentary together, especially in this part about finances, of explaining how the fractional banking system works in a very easy to digest manner so everybody gets it. This is important information, ladies and gentlemen. Super important. I want to free your mind. I want you to see things as they really are. So here we go. The fractional reserve banking system and inflation explained.
Society today is composed of a series of institutions. From political institutions, legal institutions, religious institutions, to institutions of social class, familial values, and occupational specialization. It is obvious the profound influence these traditionalized structures have in shaping our understandings and perspectives. Yet, of all the social institutions we are born into, directed by, and conditioned upon, there seems to be no system as taken for granted and misunderstood as the monetary system. Taking on nearly religious proportions, the established monetary institution exists as one of the most unquestioned forms of faith there is. How money is created, the policies by which it is governed, and how it truly affects society are unregistered interests of the great majority of the population. In a world where 1% of the population owns 40% of the planet's wealth, in a world where 34,000 children die every single day from poverty and preventable diseases, and where 50% of the world's population lives on less than $2 a day, one thing is clear: something is very wrong. And whether we are aware of it or not, the lifeblood of all of our established institutions, and thus society itself, is money. Therefore, understanding this institution of monetary policy is critical to understanding why our lives are the way they are. Unfortunately, economics is often viewed with confusion and boredom. Endless streams of financial jargon, coupled with intimidating mathematics, quickly deters people from attempts at understanding it. However, the fact is, the complexity associated with the financial system is a mere mask, designed to conceal one of the most socially paralyzing structures humanity has ever endured. A number of years ago, the Central Bank of the United States, the Federal Reserve, produced a document entitled Modern Money Mechanics. This publication detailed the institutionalized practice of money creation as utilized by the Federal Reserve and the web of global commercial banks it supports. On the opening page, the document states its objective. The purpose of this booklet is to describe the basic process of money creation in a fractional reserve banking system. It then proceeds to describe this fractional reserve process through various banking terminology, a translation of which goes something like this. The United States government decides it needs some money, so it calls up the Federal Reserve and requests, say, $10 billion. The Fed replies, saying, sure, we'll buy $10 billion in government bonds from you. So the government takes some pieces of paper, paints some official-looking designs on them, and calls them treasury bonds. Then it puts a value on these bonds to the sum of $10 billion and sends them over to the Fed. In turn, the people at the Fed draw up a bunch of impressive pieces of paper themselves, only this time calling them Federal Reserve notes, also designating a value of $10 billion to the Fed. The Fed then takes these notes and trades them for the bonds. Once this exchange is complete, the government then takes the $10 billion in Federal Reserve notes and deposits it into a bank account. And upon this deposit, the paper notes officially become legal tender money, adding $10 billion to the U.S. money supply. And there it is. $10 billion in new money has been created. Of course, this example is a generalization, for, in reality, this transaction would occur electronically, with no paper used at all. In fact, only 3% of the U.S. money supply exists in physical currency. The other 97% essentially exists in computers alone. Now, government bonds are, by design, instruments of debt, And when the Fed purchases these bonds, with money it essentially created out of thin air, the government is actually promising to pay back that money to the Fed. In other words, the money was created out of debt. This mind-numbing paradox of how money or value can be created out of debt or a liability will become more clear as we further this exercise. So, the exchange has been made and now $10 billion sits in a commercial bank account. Here's where it gets really interesting. For as based on the fractional reserve practice, that $10 billion deposit instantly becomes part of the bank's reserves, just as all deposits do. And regarding reserve requirements, as stated in modern money mechanics, a bank must maintain legally required reserves equal to a prescribed percentage of its deposits. It then quantifies this by stating, under current regulations, the reserve requirement against most transaction accounts is 10%. This means that with a $10 billion deposit, 10% or $1 billion is held as the required reserve, while the other $9 billion is considered an excessive reserve and can be used as the basis for new loans. Now, it is logical to assume that this $9 billion is literally coming out of the existing $10 billion deposit. However, this is actually not the case. What really happens is that the $9 billion is simply created out of thin air on top of the existing $10 billion deposit. This is how the money supply is expanded. As stated in modern money mechanics, of course they, the banks, do not really pay out loans from the money they receive as deposits. If they did this, no additional money would be created. What they do when they make loans is to accept promissory notes, loan contracts, in exchange for credits, money, to the borrower's transaction accounts. In other words, the $9 billion can be created out of nothing simply because there is a demand for such a loan and that there is a $10 billion deposit to satisfy the reserve requirements. Now, let's assume that somebody walks into this bank and borrows the newly available $9 billion. They will then most likely take that money and deposit it into their own bank account. The process then repeats, for that deposit becomes part of the bank's reserves. 10% is isolated, and in turn 90% of the $9 billion, or $8.1 billion, is now available as newly created money for more loans. And, of course, that 8.1 can be loaned out and redeposited, creating an additional 7.2 billion, to 6.5 billion, to 5.9 billion, etc. This deposit money creation loan cycle can technically go on to infinity. The average mathematical result is that about $90 billion can be created on top of the original $10 billion. In other words, for every deposit that ever occurs in the banking system, about 9 times that amount can be created out of thin air.
Money jitters? Ask the obliging Bank of America for a jar of soothing instant money, M-O-N-E-Y, in the form of a convenient personal loan.
So, now that we understand how money is created by this fractional reserve banking system, a logical yet elusive question might come to mind. What is actually giving this newly created money value? The answer? The money that already exists. The new money essentially steals value from the existing money supply. For the total pool of money is being increased irrespective to demand for goods and services. And as supply and demand finds equilibrium, prices rise, diminishing the purchasing power of each individual dollar. This is generally referred to as inflation, and inflation is essentially a hidden tax on the public.
What is the advice that you generally get? And that is inflate the currency. They don't say debase the currency. They don't say devalue the currency. They don't say cheat the people who are saved. They say lower the interest rates. The real deception is when we distort the value of money. When we create money out of thin air, we have no savings, yet there's so-called capital. So my question boils down to this: how in the world can we expect to solve the problems of inflation, that is, the increase in the supply of money, with more inflation?
Of course, it can't. The fractional reserve system of monetary expansion is inherently inflationary. For the act of expanding the money supply, without there being a proportional expansion of goods and services in the economy, will always debase a currency. In fact, a quick glance at the historical values of the US dollar versus the money supply reflects this point definitively, for the inverse relationship is obvious. $1 in 1913 required $21.60 in 2007 to match value. That is a 96% devaluation since the Federal Reserve came into existence. Now, if this reality of inherent and perpetual inflation seems absurd and economically self-defeating, hold that thought, for absurdity is an understatement in regard to how our financial system really operates. For in our financial system, money is debt, and debt is money. Here is a chart of the U.S. money supply from 1950 to 2006. Here is a chart of the U.S. national debt for the same period. How interesting it is that the trends are virtually the same. For the more money there is, the more debt there is. The more debt there is, the more money there is. To put it a different way, every single dollar in your wallet is owed to somebody by somebody. For remember, the only way the money can come into existence is from loans. Therefore, if everyone in the country were able to pay off all debts, including the government, there would not be $1 in circulation. In fact, the last time in American history the national debt was completely paid off was in 1835 after President Andrew Jackson shut down the central bank that preceded the Federal Reserve. In fact, Jackson's entire political platform essentially revolved around his commitment to shut down the central bank, stating at one point, "The bold efforts the present bank has made to control the government are but premonitions of the fate that awaits the American people should they be deluded into a perpetuation of this institution or the establishment of another like it." Unfortunately, his message was short-lived, and the international bankers succeeded to install another central bank in 1913, the Federal Reserve. And as long as this institution exists, perpetual debt is guaranteed. Now, so far we have discussed the reality that money is created out of debt, through loans. These loans are based on a bank's reserves, and reserves are derived from deposits. And through this fractional reserve system, any one deposit can create 9 times its original value, in turn debasing the existing money supply, raising prices in society. And since all this money is created out of debt and circulated randomly through commerce, people become detached from their original debt, and a disequilibrium exists where people are forced to compete for labor in order to pool enough money out of the money supply to cover their costs of living. As dysfunctional and backwards as all of this might seem, there is still one thing we have omitted from this equation. And it is this element of the structure which reveals the truly fraudulent nature of the system itself: the application of interest. When the government borrows money from the Fed, or when a person borrows money from a bank, it almost always has to be paid back with accrued interest. In other words, almost every single dollar that exists must be eventually returned to a bank with interest paid as well. But if all money is borrowed from the central bank and is expanded by commercial banks through loans, only what would be referred to as the principal is being created in the money supply. So then, where is the money to cover all of the interest that is charged? Nowhere. It doesn't exist. The ramifications of this are staggering, for the amount of money owed back to the banks will always exceed the amount of money that is available in circulation. This is why inflation is a constant in the economy, for new money is always needed to help cover the perpetual deficit built into the system, caused by the need to pay the interest. What this also means is that mathematically, defaults and bankruptcy are literally built into the system, and there will always be poor pockets of society that get the short end of the stick. An analogy would be a game of musical chairs, for once the music stops, somebody is left out to dry. And that's the point. It invariably transfers true wealth from the individual to the banks. For if you are unable to pay for your mortgage, they will take your property. This is particularly enraging when you realize that not only is such a default inevitable due to the fractional reserve practice, but also because of the fact that the money that the bank loaned to you didn't even legally exist in the first place. In 1969, there was a Minnesota court case involving a man named Jerome Daly, who was challenging the foreclosure of his home by the bank which provided the loan to purchase it. His argument was that the mortgage contract required both parties, being he and the bank, each put up a legitimate form of property for the exchange. In legal language, this is called consideration. Mr. Daly explained that the money was, in fact, not the property of the bank, for it was created out of nothing as soon as the loan agreement was signed. Remember what modern money mechanics stated about loans? What they do when they make loans is to accept promissory notes in exchange for credits. Reserves are unchanged by the loan transactions, but deposit credits constitute new additions to the total deposits of the banking system. In other words, the money doesn't come out of their existing assets. The bank is simply inventing it, putting up nothing of its own, except for a theoretical liability on paper. As the court case progressed, the bank's president, Mr. Morgan, took the stand, and in the judge's personal memorandum, he recalled that the plaintiff, bank's president, admitted that, in combination with the Federal Reserve Bank, did create the money and credit upon its books by bookkeeping entry. The money and credit first came into existence when they created it. Mr. Morgan admitted that no United States law or statute existed which gave him the right to do this. A lawful consideration must exist and be tendered to support the note. The jury found that there was no lawful consideration, and I agree. He also poetically added, "Only God can create something of value out of nothing." And upon this revelation, the court rejected the bank's claim for foreclosure, and Daly kept his home. The implications of this court decision are immense. For every time you borrow money from a bank, whether it is a mortgage loan or a credit card charge, the money given to you is not only counterfeit, it is an illegitimate form of consideration, and hence voids the contract to repay, for the bank never had the money as property to begin with. Unfortunately, such legal realizations are suppressed and ignored, and the game of perpetual wealth transfer and perpetual debt continues. And this brings us to the ultimate question: why? During the American Civil War, President Lincoln bypassed the high-interest loans offered by the European banks and decided to do what the Founding Fathers advocated, which was to create an independent and inherently debt-free currency. It was called the greenback. Shortly after this measure was taken, an internal document circulated between private British and American banking interests stated, "Slavery is but the owning of labor and carries with it the care of laborers, while the European plan is that capital shall control labor by controlling wages. This can be done by controlling the money. It will not do to allow the greenback, as we cannot control that." The fractional reserve policy perpetrated by the Federal Reserve, which has spread in practice to the great majority of banks in the world, is, in fact, a system of modern slavery. Think about it. Money is created out of debt. And what do people do when they are in debt? They submit to employment to pay it off. But if money can only be created out of loans, how can society ever be debt-free? It can't. And that's the point. And it is the fear of losing assets coupled with the struggle to keep up with the perpetual debt and inflation inherent in the system, compounded by the inescapable scarcity within the money supply itself, created by the interest that can never be repaid, that keeps the wage slave in line, running on the hamster wheel with millions of others, in effect powering an empire that truly benefits only the elite at the top of the pyramid. For, at the end of the day, who are you really working for? The banks. Money is created in a bank and invariably ends up in a bank. They are the true masters, along with the corporations and governments they support. Physical slavery requires people to be housed and fed. Economic slavery requires people to feed and house themselves. It is one of the most ingenious scams for social manipulation ever created, and at its core, it is an invisible war against the population. Debt is the weapon used to conquer and enslave societies, and interest is its prime ammunition. And as the majority walks around oblivious to this reality, the banks, in collusion with governments and corporations, continue to perfect and expand their tactics of economic warfare, spawning new bases, such as the World Bank and International Monetary Fund.
That's just a basic overview of our financial system and the way it works. And you see 20 minutes, and you got a pretty good in-depth explanation, yet easy to understand and digest. That's our monetary system. It's not that hard to understand. They make it seem harder and more complicated, so the people go, I don't want to pay attention to any of that. That's for accountants and geeks and nerds and people that like numbers, not for me. No. Paying attention to where your money comes from and how you're being screwed, yeah, that's definitely for you. Definitely important to know. Debt equals money, and money equals debt. Think about that. That was the big question for those of you that can remember 2008 and the banker bailouts. That was the big question that was asked. Everybody was asking, if you're going to give the banks all this money, because it was explained how the money that was given to the banks was more than enough, way more than enough, to literally pay every mortgage off at the time in the country. And it was put out there, hey, how come you won't just pay off all the mortgages? If people are gonna have to be on the hook because we're gonna borrow this money, right? The Federal Reserve is going to loan us this money at an interest rate. If we're gonna borrow this, why don't we just pay off everyone's mortgage? Wouldn't that be better? Well, now you understand why they wouldn't do that. Because if they paid off everybody's mortgage and they paid everybody's money and everybody's debt off, there wouldn't be any money. They need that debt. That's how they make money. Money is debt, and debt is money. It's a rigged game. That's why it's important to understand this, ladies and gentlemen. That's why I harp about interest. That's why I harp about inflation. They're acting like inflation's not a big deal. It is a big deal. You just learned why it's a big deal. If you need to go back, you can listen to this broadcast later on. Listen again to that clip. It's important. It's super important to understand this, ladies and gentlemen. It really is, for a multitude of reasons. Remember what Aaron Russo said. He talked about the bankers and what their ultimate goal was and their plans were. They want to get everybody chipped. In fact, you know what? Let's go to that audio. We have a few minutes before the end of the first hour. Let's go to that audio, shall we? Because I have a bunch of stuff that I want to play, including this clip. So I just happen to have it queued up. And since we were just talking about the Federal Reserve and the bankers, what else could they be up to? I mean, if economic slavery is what's going on, well, what's the agenda? What's the ultimate goal?
The ultimate goal that these people have in mind is the goal to create a one world government run by the banking industry, run by the bankers, and they're doing it in sections. The European currency, the euro, and the European Constitution is one part of it. Now they're trying to do it in America with the North American Union, right? And they want to create a new currency called the Amero, right? And the whole agenda is to create a one world government where everybody has an RFID chip implanted in them. All money is to be in those chips, right? There'll be no more cash. And this is given me straight from Rockefeller himself. This is what they want to accomplish. And all money will be in your chips. And so instead of having cash, anytime you have money in your chip, they can take out whatever they want to take out whenever they want to. If they say you owe us this much money in taxes, they just deduct it out of your chip digitally.
Total control.
Total control. And if you're like me or you, and you're protesting what they're doing, they can just turn off your chip. And you have nothing. You can't buy food. You can't do anything. It's total control of the people.
And that chip's connected to a database that has your purchasing records, what you do, what
everything.
you sell.
Everything is in there, you know? And so they want a one world government controlled by them, everybody being chipped, all your money in those chips, and they control the chips, and they control people. And you become a slave. You become a serf to these people. That's their goal. That's their intentions.
Eric, could you be specific about when you met Rockefeller, how it happened in these discussions?
I met Rockefeller through a female attorney I knew who called me up one day and said, one of the Rockefellers would like to meet you. I had made a video called Mad as Hell, and he'd seen the video and wanted to meet me and knew I was running for governor of Nevada. So sure, I'd love to meet him. And I met him and I liked him, and he was a very, very smart man. And we used to talk and share ideas and thoughts. And he's the one who told me 11 months before 9/11 ever happened that there was going to be an event. Never told him what the event was going to be, but there was going to be an event. And out of that event, we were going to invade Afghanistan to run pipelines from the Caspian Sea. We were going to invade Iraq, you know, to take over the oil fields, establish a base in the Middle East, and make it all part of the New World Order. And we'd go after Chavez in Venezuela. And sure enough, later, 9/11 happened. And I remember he was telling me how you're going to see soldiers looking in caves for people in Afghanistan and Pakistan and all these places. And there's going to be this war on terror, which is no real enemy. And the whole thing is a giant hoax, you know, but it's a way for the government to take over the American people.
He told you it was going to be a hoax.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. There's no question. He says, there's going to be war on terror. And he's just laughing. There's no, who are we fighting? I mean, why do you think 9/11 happened and then nothing's happened since then? Do you think that our security is so great here that these people who pulled off 9/11, who were able to, can't knock down another plane? Come on, it's ridiculous. 9/11 was done by people in our own government and our own banking system to perpetuate the fear of the American people into subordinating themselves to anything the government wants them to do. That's what it's about, and to create this war, this endless war on terror. And that's why and that was the first lie. And the next lie was going into Iraq, you know, to get Saddam Hussein out with his weapons of mass destruction. That was the next lie.
Now, specifically, this was a little over 6 years ago.
This was
11 months before 9/11.
Yeah.
And Nick Rockefeller, who's a lawyer, he's become your friend over the previous years, and he's saying to you that there's going to be this big event, and then out of that we're going to have a war on terror, and it's just going to go on and on.
Right, an endless war on terror without any real enemy. That you can never, so you can never define a winner.
And did he say that it's going to be perfect because you can't define an enemy? It just goes on
Yeah,
and on?
because you can't define a winner. There's no one to beat, so it goes on and on forever. And they can do whatever they want. They scare the hell out of the American public. Look, this whole war on terror is a fraud. It's a farce. It's very difficult to say it out loud because people are intimidated against saying it. Because if you say it, they want to make you into a nutcase.
let's
But
be
the truth has to come out. That's why I'm doing this interview. The fact of the matter happens to be that the whole war on terror is a fraud. It's a farce. There's a war going on in Iraq because we invaded Iraq, and people over there fighting, But the war on terror, it's a joke, And until we discover what really happened on 9/11, and who was responsible for 9/11, because that's where the war on terror emanates from. That's where it comes from. It was 9/11 that allowed this war on terror to begin. And until we get to the bottom root of 9/11, the truth of 9/11, we'll never know about the war on terror.
Aaron, you said that he was, and I think it's important, and I know this about the Rockefellers from Dr. Dennis Cuddy and many others who literally, you'll be 20 years old in a lunch line at college, and there's David Rockefeller. And here's here. They're experts at recruiting and getting what they call players, and that clearly he was. I want to make it specific and just get you to reiterate what you said last night about you got 30% of the vote. You were having an effect. You made mad as hell. They knew that you'd started the Constitution Party. Yeah. They knew that you were somebody who was taking action and getting things done. You'd already made some big films, had a lot of other successes.
Right.
So they were trying to recruit you, and didn't it come down to the point of, hey, we are here to recruit you, and don't worry, your chip's going to say, don't mess with us. This guy's don't touch.
Yeah, yes, that did happen. I was definitely being recruited, but it's more subtle than that.
Well, in your words, just go through the process, and then what he said.
Well, what it is remember, we were friends, and we used to go to my house a lot. We'd have dinner, we'd talk, and he'd tell me about business investments, how you get involved in, or they would help me with this business investment or that business investment. And was I interested in joining the Council on Foreign Relations? I would have to get a letter to join them, but was I interested in that? And, just stuff, leading you on. And I used to say to him that I never really did that because that wasn't where I was coming from. As much as I like you, Nick, your ways and my ways, we're on the opposite side of the fence. I don't believe in enslaving people. And
he would come back with, "Oh, I do."
Well, it would be more like
it's better for them.
Well, it's more like how do I put it? It was like, what do you care about them? What do you care about those people? What difference does it make to you? Take care of your own life. Do the best you can for you and your family. What do the rest of the people mean to you? They don't mean anything to you. They're just serfs. They're just people. It was just a lack of caring, and that's just not who I was. It was just sort of like cold, It was just like cold, And I used to say to him, what's the point of all this? You have all the money in the world you need. You have all the power you need. What's the point? What's the end goal? And he said the end goal is to get everybody chipped, to control the whole society. To have the bankers, the elite people, the bankers and some governor controlling the world. And I said, do all the people in the Council on Foreign Relations believe this way you do? He said, no. Most of them believe they're doing the right thing. A lot of them believe it's better off being socialistic. We have to convince people that socialism is really capitalism. Because America is becoming a socialist country. It's a communist country today. My friendship with Nick Rockefeller was one where we expressed ideas to each other and thoughts and philosophies, and he wanted me to become part of what they were doing, and for me to become a member of the CFR, and offered various business opportunities for me to get involved in, and for me to not take up the fight or the battle that I've been taking up in the past, to drop that idea, because what was the point of my fighting for the people? I was a guy who was very successful in the movie business, and I saw the truth of what was happening. I tried to express it to the people, and rather than having me express it to the people, they wanted me to join their side because I was a mover and a shaker, and rather than me opposing them, to join them. It was real simple, and he tried to recruit me into that situation, and I didn't go for it.
Did he get angry when you didn't go for it?
No. And, it was like, I remember one time he said to me, you join us, so you have an ID card, Aaron, you have a chip, and your chip will say KMA on it, And I said, what does KMA mean? He said, it means kiss my ass. And anybody stops you, a cop or whatever, and you show them your card or your chip, and they'll know to leave you alone because you're one of us. Why are you fighting for the people for? What is that about? The people just, they have to be ruled. They have to be, the Constitution, what you're standing for, is only for a few people. It's only a few individuals that can live that way, and we believe that it's best for society to be ruled by an elite people who control everything. And I said, I don't believe that. I believe God put me on this earth to be the best person I could be, and put everybody on this earth to be the best they can be, not to be a slave and a sheep to you and these people. And I don't understand why you want to control everything. What is the need for that, And I asked them, do all the people in the Council of Foreign Relations feel the same way you feel? He said, no, a lot of them think they're doing the right thing. They think that socialism is the best way to go. They think that, that they're doing the right thing. But the people at the top, they all know the truth of what's happening. And that's what it is.
So it's compartmentalized within the elite structure as well.
Of course it is. Of course it is. I mean, all the people that are in the CFR, was that 2,000-3,000 people? I forget like Dan Rather. They don't know what's going on. They join the CFR because it's prestigious. They think it's good for business. It's good for this. They don't know what's really happening. The evil that comes out of it, that's emanating out of it. And to me, the biggest evil is what's happening right now, because what happened on 9/11 is a phony, and we've never learned the truth about 9/11.
That's the question I wanted to follow up on. He tells you 11 months before there's going to be an event, all this is going to happen. What did you think on the morning of 9/11? Where were you, and did you think about Nick Rockefeller and what he had told you when you saw those towers fall?
No, I was actually in Tahiti when 9/11 happened, and I got a call from my son. And my son said, the Twin Towers, they were just attacked, and they were falling down or something. So what are you talking? I was in Tahiti, I was asleep. And he says, yeah, they were hit by a plane, And so where I lived, where I was in Tahiti, there was no television, so I had to run on the other side of the island to a hotel where they had, and it was all on television, and that's when I first saw the stuff on TV about it. And I didn't immediately equate it to Nick, but when I realized that we're going to go into Afghanistan, Iraq, and as that developed, I realized what it was. I mean, to me, I see people like Bill O'Reilly on television, right? And I see how much they control the media. Like there's this girl on Bill O'Reilly the other night from an organization saying the world can't wait. And this girl was spot on. Everything she was saying was the truth. And all Bill O'Reilly could do was call her a lunatic. He couldn't challenge the facts. They just call people names. They can't, and until we just find that, look, this world, we're heading into a world of danger, possible nuclear wars, because the banking industry is trying to take over the world. 9/11 is the beginning of the war on terror. That war on terror is leading us into Iraq, which is the next lie. So you had the lie of 9/11, how that happened. Nobody knows how Building 7 came down. Okay, we know 9/11 was a fraud. The American people don't know it, but more and more of them are believing it. Okay, so that was the first lie. Besides the inception, I'm not going back to the inception of the Federal Reserve, that original lie. But 9/11 was the first lie in this present state we're in. 9/11 is the kickoff of the war against the American people and the people of the world. 9/11 was a phony. It's a fraud. It didn't happen the way they told us it happened. Now, because of 9/11, we then had the authority to go into Afghanistan and Iraq. Iraq didn't have weapons of mass destruction. Okay, so that was the next lie. Now they're talking about going into Iran. Now, how would you feel if you were Iran and you had this big, powerful country, America, go into your next door neighbor, take over their oil fields, right? Wouldn't you be worried that what they were going to do to you? Of course you're going to be worried. But the people of America don't think about it from Iran's point of view. They think about it from our point of view. So now we're going to send more troops into Iraq and keep building up because they want Iraq and the Middle East to become part of the New World Order. And Iraq was using Saddam wanted to start using euros instead of dollars, right?
He was messing up their whole consumption.
Iran wants to start using euros instead of dollars.
They have.
Okay? So I'm saying what they're trying to do is preserve their power. And one lie leads to the next lie, leads to the next lie. And until you get to the root cause of 9/11, which is supposedly the war on terror, we'll never solve our problems here. Should we send more troops into Iraq? Should we not send more troops into Iraq? Well, the truth is, the fact is, that it all goes back to this war on terror. Where did 9/11 come from? That's the root cause of everything. And until we have a full investigation, find out why Building 7 fell down, why they shipped all the steel out of America so quickly, from the buildings, why all the things that don't make any sense about 9/11, until we find out why it really happened, we'll never understand why there's a war on terror. And we'll never be able to prove that the war on terror is a phony. Nick and I discussed many things. One of the things we discussed, or he brought up in conversation, was reducing world population, and felt that there were too many people in the world. In a way, I agree, there are too many people in the world, but I don't think I have the authority to say who's going to die and who's not going to die, But they felt that they wanted to reduce world population, and he felt that it should be reduced by half. He even mentioned to me once they were having a real problem trying to solve the Israel-Palestinian problem. And he talked to me once about they were playing with the idea of bringing Israel to Arizona, and taking all the people from Israel and giving everybody $1 million and setting up Israel in the state of Arizona.
Unbelievable.
Just to end that problem, because that's a problem that they're not in charge of, in a sense. They're not controlling that problem. They're very arrogant. They can do whatever they want to do. We've given these people the authority to create money out of thin air, and through that device, they control everything. And if you want to win the battle to stop that, you have to deny them the ability to create money. It's only because they can make money that they have all this power.
They literally have the money machines.
They have the money machines. They can print it. They can do whatever they want to do. They own everything.
Aaron, we take over pretty quick. If we were the guys that issued the money, everybody had to come give us real assets for the use of this money we just printed up.
People. I tell people, why in the world does the American government borrow money from the banks when they have the ability to create it themselves without borrowing it and paying interest on it? Why? And nobody can answer that question. Not one politician ever raises that. Why does the American government borrow money when they can create it without paying interest?
Well, we did create it up until 1913.
And so people say, well, because if the American government does it, it'll create inflation. That's the answer. I say, well, let's look at it. The American government has the Federal Reserve do it, which creates the same inflation as if they did it. But also with the inflation, now you're getting massive debt. So with the Federal Reserve, you have inflation and debt. Now, if the American government made the money, backed by gold, which limited the amount they could make, you wouldn't have debt and you wouldn't have inflation. So through these bankers attempting to taking over America, knowing that America was the freest nation in the world, it was necessary for them to take over America, take away our gun rights of freedom to bear arms, and create a country where we become slaves. Because once they take over America, the rest of the world becomes a lot easier for them. And so, by creating 9/11, an event to terrify the American people that were being attacked by terrorists, you create a world where there's an enemy that can never be pinpointed. You can never win the battle. It's a 100-year war. It's a never-ending war on terrorism, right? So you're always fighting this war. And through the war on terrorism, which is the 9/11, which is the first lie, then you create the war on terrorism, which is the next lie. Then you create the war in Iraq for weapons of mass destruction, which is the next lie. And it's one lie to the next lie to the next lie. Now it's going to be Iran, the next lie, sending more troops and a surge into Iraq. It's just one thing leading to the other, and it's always with the event. It's always in the point of taking over more countries, more dominance, Making sure the American dollar, making sure the G8 stays in control of everything. And what they want to do is to control the American people, control the people of the world, put RFID chips in everybody, so everybody's a slave to these central banks.
Did you ever talk to Nick Rockefeller after he told you all this and then 9/11 took place?
No. But he did. He told me that you're going to see men running around caves looking for Osama bin Laden. You're going to see men looking for, these guys, and they're going to be,
They told you it was all going to be bull.
It's a phony. The whole thing is a fake. It's a fraud.
Was he laughing, or was he just coldly saying this?
No, it's more laughing, cynical, laughing. It's more like, look how stupid everybody is. Look how stupid everybody. We can do whatever we want to do. But what about bin Laden being in the American hospital, getting kidney help?
Yeah.
Right, in the American hospital, right? They could, if they wanted Osama bin Laden, they could have gotten him.
Oh, yeah.
Look, we're dealing with complete evil. We're dealing with complete evil. And until the American people wake up and say, we don't want this evil in our country anymore, and we want to come back to a country of decency and goodness and integrity and honor, we're going down that road. And that's what it's going to take. It's going to people to stand up and say, we don't want to live in this kind of a world anymore. I believe we should pull all our troops out of Iraq. I believe we should leave other countries alone. Let other countries live their lives the way they choose to. Stop trying to spread democracy around the world, which is the worst form of government there is anyway. Restore our republic to what it's supposed to be, and go back to what the founding fathers gave us, and try and restore that. Restore the republic. Like the point of everything is that we have to mobilize. Each one of us. You and I can't do everything, Alex. You and I may be leaders. We may be out there, and people listen to us, what we have to say, and follow us. But the truth of the matter happens to be, it takes all Americans to stand together, to stand tall, to mobilize and say, we're not going to take this anymore. I'm mad as hell. I'm not going to take it anymore. We're going to stand up and fight the battle. And you and I can't do this alone. We're just leaders of the thing. But other people have to join in with us and stand side by side, shoulder to shoulder, and say, I'm not going to take it anymore. That's what it's going to take to win this effort, and to stop cooperating with the government and with all their rules and regulations, and to wake everybody up, to hand out DVDs of my movie, to hand out DVDs of your movie, to educate everybody to what's going on.
Well, if you don't fight the corruption and you don't stand up for what's right in life, you can end up being a serf and a slave, and you're leaving your children a world that you wouldn't want to live in yourself. So how can you, in decency, behave that way? You have to stand up for what's right in life. And unless you do that, you're nothing.
Well, freedom and liberty is what people really want, and it's time to stop the duplicity of the government from lying to us. You see, many people know the truth of what's happening in this country. They know the truth, like the numbers you gave about 9/11. But they're afraid to stand up. People have to find their courage and stand up and say, I'm not going to take this anymore. I know the truth, and it's like they create a situation where if you tell the truth, you're considered a lunatic. In other words, if someone goes on a TV show and says 9/11's an inside job, oh, you're an idiot, you're crazy. They call you names. You can't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid to be ridiculed by these people. If 9/11 was a phony, and I know it was, then stand up and say it's a phony. Don't be scared to tell the truth. Don't allow their powers of trying to make you look silly to frighten you. But they keep perpetuating, the war on terrorism. They keep perpetuating all these things that are lies. And because we've given the Federal Reserve the money-making power, they control the media, they control the government, and they're all in bed together. So you're fighting all this propaganda all the time, and it's a very difficult fight.
Americans, mobilize. Stand together, stand tall, tell the government you're mad as hell, no longer cooperate with the government, do not accept the national ID card, do everything in your power to restore freedom and your individuality back to America. Stop being a country run by the institutions for the institutions. Let's go back to we the people, by the people, for the people, as opposed to We the institution, by the institution, for the institution. Stand up for your individual rights. Stand up for the godliness that's in each and every one of us.
Aaron is correct, and he was correct. This was filmed back in 2008, this interview, and or end of 2007, around like end of 2007, beginning of 2008. And Aaron passed away shortly thereafter, within about 6 to 8 months after the interview. He had cancer, and he was 100% correct. This will not stop until everybody stands up and says enough is enough. The government is like an abusive spouse. And until you stand up and say no, they're going to keep doing it. We have to stand up, but people don't even know enough to stand up. That's the problem. People were waking up, and then they got dragged back down into the mire with very base level arguments. They keep humanity at a base level of thinking. That way humanity doesn't think outside the box. They're too busy arguing over base level stuff that we've already, solved and gotten past repeatedly. And we keep having these cycles where we go back into it. Ask yourself why. Who leads us into those cycles? Don't worry, we'll do future broadcasts on that. But I have a theme going here, and I have a limited amount of time, and I have a very important last piece of audio for you that I dug out. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, I am many things: researcher, radio show host, but I am also an archivist. And I've been archiving things since I started doing this in the end of 2005. So I have tons of stuff. One of the things I want to play for you that I dug out is a speech by a lady, and this was done in 2010, so 11 years ago. Her name is Kitty Worthman, and she was doing the rounds back when Obama was the president. And you could see what was going on then. She was doing the rounds at different events and doing speeches where she was explaining how she grew up in, I believe it was Austria, during World War II when Hitler came to power, and then she was there under the Nazi regime, and then 3 years underneath the communists after the Soviets came in. So she experienced two different types of dictatorships: the fascist dictatorship and a communist dictatorship. And she has this unique perspective to be able to share it with people. Now, Kitty was 85 when she gave this speech. I don't know if she's still alive or not. I hope she is, but she'd be 96 now if she is. This was in 2010. And again, this is a perspective that is lost on many of us because of that generation's age and many of them having passed on. That's why I think it's extremely important for everybody now to hear this. So this is Kitty Worthman, and she's talking about what it was like to live under a fascist and a communist dictator, but also how Hitler came to power and how he was voted in. It was at the ballot box. It wasn't the use of the tank that brought him in. Just let's listen. Let's go back in time to 2010 and listen to what Kitty has to say.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kitty Worthman.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to your great state of New Jersey. I was born in Austria, and I lived there 7 years under Hitler's brutal regime. And after World War II, 3 years under Soviet communist occupation. In 1938, the media reported that Hitler rolled into Austria with tanks and guns and took us over. Not true at all. The Austrian people elected Hitler by 98% of the vote by means of the ballot box. Now, you might ask, how could a Christian nation, almost 100% Catholic, to elect a monster like Hitler? The truth is, at the beginning, Hitler didn't look like or talk like a monster at all. He talked like an American politician. In 1938, Austria was in a very deep depression. We had 1/3 of our workforce unemployed. We had 25% inflation, and if you would borrow money from the bank, you paid 25% interest. It was not unusual that my mother would feed, on the average, 30 people a day, a bowl of soup and a slice of bread. People would come knocking on the door. They wanted to work. There were no jobs. The depression was so bad that we had riots in the streets. There were two political factions fighting each other. Communist Party was getting very powerful. So was the Nazi Party. Now, when I speak of the Nazi Party, the Nazi Party, what we are going to be in our country, the National Socialist Party. I translate Nationalsozialism. That's where the word Nazi came from. So we heard Hitler speaking in Germany. Germany had full employment. They had law and order, and we had riots in the street. And in Germany, the people had a high living standard. They all drove the little Volkswagen, the Beetle car, and there was nothing ever said that anybody was being persecuted. So when we had that unbelievable unemployment, and the people were getting so desperate, they petitioned the government for a plebiscite, for an election. And that's when we elected Hitler by 98% of the vote by means of the ballot box. So we got a new government, National Socialism, Nazi government. Of course, we had no idea what that would all be. We just thought we were all going to live a high standard of living like Germany. And Hitler promised us that within weeks we would have full employment. And he would feed the poor people. The Red Cross came in. Everybody was being fed. Everybody got something. And we were so grateful for everything. Oh, we thought Hitler was our savior. Oh, yes, he was a very good orator. He gave very good speeches, and we heard that here too, haven't we? So, when we got the new government, nobody was elected anymore. Everybody was appointed. From the school board, the county commission, the city commission, to the legislature, and to the governors. And Hitler said, the best people are being appointed. We only pick the best people, and we trusted him. So we had no more elections, none whatsoever. We also had regionalism. Regionalism is to centralize the government. Centralization is socialism. So Hitler said we have to merge our 7 states into 4. That will save money. And we only would have 4 governors. We thought that's a good idea. As a lobbyist in South Dakota, I found a bill 3 times to consolidate our 66 counties into 15. That's centralization. That's socialism. Take away local control. That's socialism. So with our new government, we got a lot of new laws. We got a very, very good law, we thought, the Equal Rights Amendment. Well, equal rights for women. Haven't we heard that here too? So the Equal Rights Amendment had 2 components, economically and socially. Economically, to redistribute the wealth of the country. And then, socially, to get all the women, the moms, out into the workforce, into employment. Oh yes, Hitler got a lot of jobs, political appointments, hundreds and hundreds of bureaucrats, and of course he built the Autobahn, the freeway. So the moms were out into the workforce. What do you think would happen to the children? The government had immediately a remedy, child care centers. So the state raised our children. And by economically to redistributing the wealth, we had massive welfare. Because we had a guaranteed income, the government decreed that everybody has to be equal, have an equal income. Those who worked hard paid 70% taxes, and those who were down here, they were getting the equal income like those who worked hard. That's called socialism. Also, education was nationalized very quickly, literally overnight. I was 12 years old. I was in 6th grade. I walked into my classroom. I went to public school. We had an excellent school system. We prayed in public school. And we also had religious education twice a week. That all stopped overnight. I walked into my classroom March 13, 1938. The crucifix was gone, and there was Hitler's picture with the Nazi flag on each side. And our teacher said, today we don't pray anymore. We sing Deutschland, Deutschland über alles, the national anthem. And she said, we don't have religious education anymore either. We have physical education instead. And on Sundays, there would be National Youth Day. And that would be compulsory. Everybody had to attend. And if our parents wouldn't send us the first time, they would get a very stiff letter of warning. Second time, they would have to pay a fine of the equivalent of $300. And the third time we didn't attend was jail for our parents. Well, we couldn't go to church anymore. The first 2 hours we had political education. Today, I call it political indoctrination. We were being told not to listen to our parents. They were old-fashioned old fogies, didn't understand the youth. Only Hitler did. So we were being totally indoctrinated. And the rest of the day we had sports. We got all the equipment free. We got tennis rackets. We got golf clubs. And the boys of age 16, they got motorcycles so they could form a motorcycle squad. Not only that, they were taken out to the airfield to fly gliders. You can imagine that the end of the day we went back home and told our parents how wonderful Hitler was, what he was doing for us, and how great everything was. And of course, we all were compulsory, had to attend the Hitler Youth. That was compulsory. We argued with our parents all the time. We said, look, you don't know anything. You are old-fashioned. You don't understand us. They put a wedge between us and our parents. So my good mother, when my next school term came around, she announced that she would take me out of this horrible public school. She would enroll me in a private school with an excellent curriculum, but no fun. And I thought, this is terrible. But she packed me off, and as we arrived at that big school with an 8-foot wall around and a locked iron gate, I bid my mother goodbye. I almost hated her. She was a wise woman. She said, someday when you grow up, you will realize what I'm doing for you. Needless to say, if my mother wouldn't have not done that, today I would be a radical Marxist. On holidays, I would go back home and visit my friends. I did not like what I saw. Girls of age 16 were pregnant to have babies for Hitler. Oh, Hitler wanted lots of babies. He knew what he all had in mind. And all this, the lifestyle was very, very, very loose, I did not like. So that was the educational system. It was literally, education was nationalized. Hitler also gave us free radios. And then he nationalized our radio station. And we were told that if you listen to a foreign radio station, there's capital punishment. You don't turn on Switzerland or BBC. We only had one voice, the government. They ran the radio station. The newspaper were being censored before it hit the street. Hitler also looted the Jewish banks, and then he nationalized our banks. Then he nationalized our only car industry. Austria produced a little car, a little bit bigger than a Fiat. Hitler said, we don't need a Fiat. We have the Volkswagen. So everything was being nationalized. He also nationalized our healthcare system. We had, before Hitler, an excellent healthcare system. Privately insured, we had good doctors, we had good hospitals, we had a lot of good research. That all stopped. It was free for everybody. Now, I remember my brother-in-law was a family physician. He told me that when he would go to his office in the morning at 8 o'clock, 40 patients were waiting for him to be cared for. People went to the doctor for everything and anything. And my brother-in-law said it was like practicing medicine on a conveyor belt. He could not take enough time for each patient because he was totally government controlled. The government took away free enterprise, salaried the doctors and the hospitals, and many, many doctors left the country because if you would need elective surgery, not emergency, you waited 18 months for a hospital bed. So many doctors left the country, including my own husband. He would not want to practice medicine like his brother had to. And when he came to the United States, he marveled how wonderful our healthcare is, how wonderful our research is, and how wonderful our hospitals, how modern they were. He said, I hope it never will end up in socialized medicine. Also, we had many government agencies, the bureaucrats. The bureaucrats were writing all the rules and all the regulation. That's socialism. The unelected bureaucrats, and a lot of it applied to the farmers. The bureaucrats would go out on the farm and measure their land, told the farmers what to plant and how much he had to harvest. They also counted their livestock, how much they had to, since our food was being rationed, had to turn into the government. God help every farmer if they butchered the pig for themselves. He sure would go to jail. They also sent out the bureaucrats to count the chickens and ordered the chickens how many eggs they had to lay. That's socialism. Hitler wrote a book, My Struggle, Mein Kampf. But very few people read it. Had we read it, we would have known what was coming. But the people were so busy with sports, that was everything. Athletic events were everything. But people did not read. They did not read his book. We also had, abortions of course were highly illegal. Hitler wanted a lot of babies. But if both parents were not 100% Aryan, you know the master race, the mother, if she was pregnant, she was selected to have an abortion. Can you imagine to force you to have an abortion? That was absolutely horrible. We also had euthanasia. And I was an eyewitness to that. In my last year of college, I was sent to a small village in the Austrian Alps. You know, that village was very isolated by mountains, and in the winter time, the mountain passes were closed because of snow. And in that village, the people would intermarry. And we know by genetics that a lot of offsprings were mentally handicapped. And in that village, there were 15 of them. One I know very well, Vincent, our janitor. He could not speak very well. He could not read and write. But all these people, they did good manual work. So one day, the health department came to the families and asked them if they would want to send their son or daughter to an institution to learn how to read and write and maybe learn a trade like basket weaving. Gladly the parents signed the papers. Off they went. I remember that morning I looked out of my classroom window and I saw Vincent and all these people going into the health department van, and they were taken away. And I thought they were going for an outing, but I asked my principal, and he said, no, they're going into an institution to learn how to read and write. And I said, oh, that's wonderful. 6 months passed. The letters came back to the parents that they died a natural but merciful death. They all were in excellent health when they left. Why should they die within 6 months? It dawned on us, and the news traveled very fast in the village, that they were being euthanized. We also had a federal police force, commonly known as the Gestapo, and they were everywhere, everywhere, in civilian clothes. You didn't know who they were. But it went like this, since our food was all rationed, and somebody in your family passed away like grandma, so you quickly took that coveted pound of sugar and went to the grocery store and got that pound of sugar. And then the next day the Gestapo would knock on your door and they said, we know you bought that pound of sugar instead of turning in the coupon by law, but you have to inform on your neighbor, your boss, your friends, everybody you know. And you come to our office once a week. But if you don't do that, then we will arrest you. That way they had a network of informers. We didn't trust the mailman. We couldn't trust anybody who came to our house. And when we talked something politically in our family, We only whispered. So that was the informants, the Gestapo, and they were everybody. And we were deadly scared of the Gestapo because people disappeared all the time. We also had gun registration. Oh, the Austrian people they all had guns. But the government said the guns are very dangerous. Children are playing with guns, hunting accidents happen, and we really have to have total control, safety. And we had criminals again. And the only way that we can trace the criminal was by the serial number of the gun. So we dutifully went to the police station and we registered our guns. Not long after, they said, no, it didn't help. The only way that we don't have accidents and crimes, you bring the guns to the police station and then we don't have any crimes anymore and any accidents. And if you don't do that, capital punishment. So that's what we did. Hitler also nationalized our churches. He said those beautiful cathedrals need a lot of upkeep and restoration, and there's not enough money coming in by private donation on Sunday. So we have to have a church tax. So when they pay their income tax, you pay 2% church tax. That way, Hitler could control the churches. No pastor could speak out anymore. So dictatorship didn't happen overnight. It took 5 years, gradually, little by little, to escalate up to a dictatorship. And of course with the Gestapo, and I also should relate to you, it was probably last year in February in 2009, I drove to the Capitol one morning as a lobbyist, turned on the radio, and I heard President Obama say, anybody who is criticizing him, report it to the White House, the snitch program. So be careful what you say. Our borders were being closed. Nobody could get in and nobody could get out. We were sitting ducks. That's what happened to us. Also, I had the opportunity in November 1985 to go to Switzerland to the summit conference between President Reagan and Premier Gorbachev. I was to accommodate the American women who went over there to support President Reagan. My other mission was to infiltrate the Communist Peace March. And I came in disguise as a horrible-looking hippie. I marched with Bella Abzug, the congresswoman, the late congresswoman, Jesse Jackson, and Barbara Boxer. And as we arrived at the Hotel Hilton for the press conference, I saw a group of people there who were not at the Peace March. And I walked up to a woman and I said, how come you were not at the Peace March? And she said, well, we are all members of the German Communist Party, and we couldn't get legally into Switzerland, so we were over the mountains. Hence, all their muddy boots and torn jackets. So I said, well, tell me more about what is the occasion, what you are doing here. Well, first of all, she said, we are supporting Premier Gorbachev. And I said, well, that's also interesting. Tell me more. What are your real goals? So she said, well, right now we take Nicaragua and Honduras, then we go into Mexico. And I said, why Mexico, such a poor, corrupt country? She said, that is our major goal. I said, why? To take back the territory what America stole from us. California, New Mexico, Arizona, Texas. And I said, look, you cannot do this. You need a lot of people. It sounds to me like a revolution. She said, you American are so naive. Your churches are doing the work for us. And it hit me like a ton of bricks, the sanctuary movement. There are a lot of churches who are bringing in the illegals. So I said to her, tell me, when is this event supposed to happen? She said, that all depends who your president is. Maybe 2004, but most possible 2008. Who is our president? And look what's happening at the border. When I saw on television in Los Angeles when they marched, they carried the Mexican flag and they trampled on the American flag. It dawned on me, they're here. When the people fear the government, that's tyranny. But when the government fears the people, that's you, the Tea Party. That's liberty. Keep your guns and buy more guns. America is still a Christian nation, no matter what Obama says. I am an optimist. God is still on the throne. Thank you. He did not fail us in Austria when the Americans liberated us, and he will save America. We have to take our country back as we know it. We have to take the U.S. Senate back. We have to take the White House back. My speech is out there, and it's designed as a house party that you buy my CD and invite 5 or 6 people to your home and play the CD. We did that in South Dakota. We elected a very conservative congresswoman. I went to Minnesota. We elected Michelle Bachmann. And we defeated a very liberal Democrat in Minnesota who was in for 18 years. And I am speaking all over the United States, everywhere, this year, last year, and next year. We have to take America back as we know it. Those of us who sailed past the Statue of Liberty, we came to a country of unbelievable freedom and opportunity. America is the greatest country in the world if we can keep it. God bless America, and God bless you.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Kitty Worthman. That is one of the most powerful pieces of information I could give to you. Does any of that sound familiar? Vaguely familiar at all to what's going on? And this was back in 2010. 11 years later, we're in the same boat. The Biden administration is the Obama administration. It's literally 98% of the administration is the same people. So it's the same goal, the same agenda. Same thing is going on behind the scenes. It's right there in your face, ladies and gentlemen. Information and knowledge is power. That's why I do this, to help level the playing field. As I said, I'm an archivist, ladies and gentlemen, and I do have tons of this stuff. So stay tuned for further broadcasts for more massive info drops like this. You are the heroes that you have all been looking for and waiting for. You are the change that this world needs. So go out and be the change that this world needs. I believe in you. I know everybody here at KGRA believes in you. So go out and be the superheroes that this world needs, ladies and gentlemen. I love you all, and I'll catch you all again next week. I'm out of here.